With this being a 3-year study and us only being in the first year, we've only had 3 limb loss infants and 3 typically developing infants, totaling up to 16 data collection sessions. But even with that small sample size, we've already seen significant data. So with the typically developing infants, we have already seen that their speed and their cadence increase as they get older. And so with cadence, it's how often they, how frequent their steps are, right? And so the speed increase was kind of expected because, as they get older, they practice crawling more, and they get more, they just crawl more, right? And so with that was expected, but the cadence increase, that was not expected. And so it kind of shows that there's a correlation with the cadence and the speed. And so that's something new that we've already learned.
So when you measure it at a flat angle, it's different if you're going to do it at 10 or 20. However, for subcutaneous fat, they're all, statistically speaking, they're all the same. So it's something that can be, done interchangeably. So what we came up with is for future study development or interpretation, you should always take into consideration the angle if you're doing this. One of the goals of our main study, because it's kind of like a sub-study, one of the goals of our main study is to propose the use of ultrasound measurements for abdominal fat. So we're hoping that now that we know that there is a difference, the angle of the table should be taken into consideration in clinical settings or just research.
Overall, we found that peak force was unaffected by the walk test. There were no detriments overall at any of the time point measures. On the other hand, at rate of force development between 0 and 200 milliseconds, we saw statistically significant differences, which suggests that even a moderately fatiguing walk test can elicit neural detriment. As far as this application though, because it's still an ongoing study, we hope to eventually look at the differences between a young age group and a middle age group, because we know that with age we see muscular detriment, muscular decline in output, and we want to see if something as simple as a task reflecting activities of daily living can also elicit that kind of detriment.
So for this study, what we wanted to do is compare the active PAL4 to the active graph, because this is the gold standard for measuring vigorous activity. So we wanted to see because it started measuring vigorous activity in 2018, so we kind of wanted to see if it compares to the gold standard. So for our study, we had 10 different participants, and we were able to get 25 different data points from that. We had them go through vigorous activity, whether that be resistance training, running, or cycling, and we kind of how we determined that was based on an RPE scale. So it's a 1 through 10 scale, and if it's greater than 5, that would be considered vigorous. So it was perceived off of their exertion, and then also the age estimated heart rate max for them. If it was 76% or higher than that, then that would be vigorous activity.
This is kind of the main takeaway. It just kind of tells us that if you're more satisfied with being a student, you're more satisfied with how KSU is preparing you for your career, that's going to drive you to be more into the athletic side of things for your school as well. And that's also going to help drive up attendance. I mean, if you're more interested in the athletics, you're going to want to go to more games. So that's kind of what I found, and I'll be honest, it's not really what I expected when I first ran the survey. I didn't think it would be finding the athletics and academics to coincide, but that's what I found.
As medicines and technologies improve, the maternal mortality rate, which is shown here in the United States, continues to grow. Specifically, the maternal mortality rate of Black women, which is shown here. The maternal mortality rate of Black women, it was 55.3 deaths per 100,000 live births in 2020, which is what the black lines are, 2020. Okay, which is 2.9 times that of white women. And knowing that your chances of complications are higher after birth can increase the stress you experience, which is why the purpose of this study is to inform people about the impacts of stress on maternal mortality, note some of the contributing factors, and to test the knowledge of the signs and symptoms of a complication.
I selected the final 4 standards, that is club-related consumption per season, and the number of games watching per season, and the number of visits to the stadium per season. We can measure it, right, statistically. And other one is whether to have uniforms or cheering tools. These 4 criteria is set it, and diehard fans meet all these 4 criteria. So diehard fans should have 1 or more uniforms or a cheering tool and spend more than $100 per season on club-related activities, watch more than 70% of the games per season, and watch more than 10% of the games at the stadium per season.